Hello, everybody, and welcome to Ball Down South. This is the number one college football podcast in the South. We're going to go ahead and get started with Ohio State with our Big Ten review. John, tell me about Ohio State.
I like this Ohio State team. They bring back CJ Stroud, they bring back Travion Henderson, Jackson Smith, Marvin Harris Jr. Um, I think this could be Ryan Day's best offense that he's ever had. But the biggest thing with this Ohio State team is they need to defend the run a little bit better. Last year, in the Michigan game, they got pretty much ran over. And there was times where they was inconsistent at times. But as far as offensive playmakers, skill position players wise, this could possibly be Ryan Day's best offense. So I'm gonna go on a limb and say that this team could possibly be in the playoff again. It's the Alabama of the Big Ten. They're always up there in the tops, and especially towards the end of the year. So I'm gonna give them another shot at going to the playoffs again. I think this team has that potential this year.
Okay. Brad, what do you think about him?
Yeah, I mean, Ohio State's got Ryan Day as the coach. I can't believe this is already going to be his fourth year. Um, they were 11-2 last year, 8-1 in the conference. I'll give you a few numbers for them. They were number one in total offense, number one in scoring, number two in third down conversion, number three in passing. CJ Stroud threw for over 4,400 yards, 44 TDs, only threw 6 INTs last year, and they do have a bunch of people back on offense. I mean, their offense is loaded. They do have a young star by the name of Marvin Harrison Jr., rising star. People might recognize that name from the Colts from in the 2000s, basically, with Peyton Manning. They brought in, their trouble last year in the Michigan game and what, bounced them and kept them out of the playoffs was their defense. And they brought in Oklahoma State's defensive coordinator, Jim Knowles, and he actually brought a guy with him from Oklahoma State. He brought a safety by the last name McAllister that's probably going to be a player for them on defense this year, I would think. They had trouble in the trenches is where they had the biggest trouble in that Michigan game last year. Their secondary has to be a little bit better making plays so they can get off the field in those big games and stuff like that. And I think that's why he brought in Jim Knowles to try to make the defense better. Now, I was doing a little research today, and contradicting reports are saying one report saying the defense looks pretty good in fall camp, and another report saying that the defense still kind of has some holes, it looks like, to fill. So, we'll find out pretty soon and pretty quick because they open the season with Notre Dame.
Right.
And Notre Dame comes to their house, actually, and they open the season with Notre Dame. That's their big non-conference game. They get Wisconsin, Iowa, and Michigan at home. They play 5 Big Ten home games. They're away games that could be slip-ups, would be Michigan State and Penn State away. So looking at their schedule, I mean, it's Ohio State, so I expect them to win 10, 11 games just because they're Ohio State, and looking at their schedule, that first game against Notre Dame is going to be a big game. It is at home for them. And they have 3 pretty big games at home, Wisconsin, Iowa, and Michigan. So, I can see them easily going 10-2. But to be honest with you, I really think this team ought to compete for the Big Ten title and for the college football playoffs. So I'm going to put them at 11-1.
Yeah. Okay. See, I'm right there with you. I think they're going to be there at the end, not just in the playoff. I think they're going to be in the national championship game. So I'm going to go ahead and fill in my bracket as well a little bit. So, everybody, I think I'm going to take my turn and put Ohio State in there. But John, take me to that team up north. You know, that rival. What about Michigan?
Well, Michigan, they lost Aiden Hutchinson to the NFL, Ogbo. They lost Josh Ross. So they've lost quite a bit to the NFL last year. So, but they do bring back Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards, Caden McNamara, Ronnie Bell at wide receiver. So there's some holes on the defensive side of the ball, but on the offensive side of the ball, they bring back a little bit more firepower. So the secondary, in my opinion, for Michigan is going to have to pick up the slack for the missed people up in the front four in the middle linebackers positions. So I don't think Michigan will have the same type of outcome they had last year, but I do think they have a good season. I think they'll be competing for the Big Ten championship again, but I just think Ohio State will win it this year. It's in the shoe this time, so Ohio State's going to be pretty upset, and they're going to come back and they're going to want to, they want to have some revenge on Michigan for what they did to them last year. So, but I still see a good bowl for them, possibly a Citrus Bowl. Um, maybe, maybe even bigger than that. Maybe a Orange Bowl possibly. But I just don't see them going to the playoff like they did last year. So many holes that they lost in the up in the front.
Yeah. No defensive Heisman nominee this year. Brad, what do you think about him?
Not really runs off my Blake Corum could be. He's a good running back. That's
All right, Brad, tell me what you think about Michigan.
Well, so I mean, Jim Harbaugh finally came through last year in the Michigan Ohio State game. He was 0 for 6 before last year. Finally won one of them. So I'll give him that. That gave him the Big Ten title, and they went to the college football playoff and played Georgia and got beat pretty bad by Georgia in the semifinal game. They're having a QB battle this time. It's between McCarthy and McNamara. So, they're having a QB battle this time. So they are bringing back Ronnie Bell. He's back from an injury last year. And they should be in good shape on the offensive line. Zach Center's back. He was all Big Ten last year. So, their offensive line and the running game, and they have a few receivers to go with that. They have a running back that had nearly 1,000 yards and 11 TDs last year. They did lose their top running back. He was their second running back last year. But they also, John's right, they lost a ton on the defense and to the NFL. They're going to have to, their interior line is probably going to have to lead them in defense this year. And that's saying something with losing Hutchinson from last year. But they have a guy by the name of Smith. It's 326 pounds on the inside there. He's going to be a load for them. And they have another guy by the name of Chris Jenkins that's going to come in there. He's a junior this year, has played a lot of snaps, and he'll be on the defensive line for them. You look at their schedule, their non-conference schedule looks like cake, to be honest with you. And they play Maryland, Penn State, Michigan State, Nebraska, and Illinois at home.
Yeah.
And Iowa, Indiana, Rutgers, and Ohio State away. So, their schedule sets up fairly nice for them to maybe be there and have a chance at that Ohio State game.
Oh, yeah.
That their schedule sets up pretty nice. If they can get by Iowa away and beat Penn State and Michigan State at home, then they'll be there for the Ohio State game at Ohio State, of course. Now, I just said if they could beat Michigan State at home, everybody in the country wants to talk about Harbaugh's record against Ohio State, but I'm going to give you a record that most people don't probably know. He's 3-4 against Michigan State.
Yeah.
And he's 0-2 against Mel Tucker.
Yeah.
So, there's there's something to be said. He's got to beat, and it's at home this year. It's at the big house. So, that's a game that they absolutely have to win in order to have that shot against Ohio State.
Right.
Looking at their schedule, I don't really see too many slip ups. I can see them easily going 10-2.
Okay.
Just by looking at their schedule.
Yeah. That's understandable. I mean, powerhouse like Michigan in the Big Ten, so
Right.
10-2 is totally respectable. Coming off of a big loss, loss of players this year, and having to deal with a lot. But take me to the redheaded stepchild of the Big Ten, John. What about Wisconsin?
Wisconsin, they returned Graham Hurts at quarterback. The biggest thing with them last year was they was inconsistent at quarterback. The run game was pretty good, but they needed to do a little bit better job throwing the football. Hurts was in the bottom half of the Big Ten in passing yards last year. He had 11 interceptions and only 10 touchdowns, and that's not going to cut it at a place like Wisconsin. But they did bring in offensive coordinator Bobby Ingram, former Penn State wide receiver. So, in my opinion, I think he'll open it up a little bit more compared to what they have. But and what's funny is this is a stat that sticks out to me that it just blows your mind. It's been a decade since Wisconsin's won a Big Ten championship. And if you remember, they used to have guys like Ron Dane and what was the quarterback, Russell Wilson, and
Yeah,
you just don't see that at Wisconsin, especially with the type of talent that they bring in. And at the end of the day, I feel like Wisconsin's an 8-win team this year. I feel like they'll open the offense up a little bit more than they did last year. But quarterback play is going to have to get better because, on defense, they're pretty stout.
Yeah.
And especially on the O-line, they're always strong on the O-line because you see a lot of guys going to the NFL from Wisconsin. So, I mean, you can have the best O-line in the world, but if your quarterback play is inconsistent, you're not going to win many football games. So,
Right.
but I got them winning 8 games. I got them going to a good bowl. So, hopefully they can turn around the inconsistent play at quarterback.
Okay. How about you, Brad?
Well, I mean, first I'm going to talk about their schedule. I'm going to look at their schedule, and they play Washington State at home in their non-conference game, Pac-12 team. And then their home schedule in the Big Ten is Illinois, Purdue, Maryland, and Minnesota. That's their home schedule. Now their away schedule, they play Ohio State away, Northwestern, Michigan State away, Iowa away, and Nebraska away. So, their away schedule's what's going to be the telltale sign for their season, I believe. They did go out and hire Bobby Ingram as their OC. He has spent the last couple of 2 or 3 years at the Baltimore Ravens in that offense. He wasn't the OC, but he spent some time there in the Baltimore Ravens. And they've had a really good offense with Lamar the last few years. So he's, had a little. They expect him to come in and open up the offense just a little bit. Wisconsin's known for ground and pound, basically. They have a time of possession, usually about 33, 35 minutes a game. And, they have probably the best duo running back combo in the Big Ten. They have Braylon Allen and Ches. I'm not sure how he pronounces his last name, but I'm going to say Malusi. I'm not sure how he pronounces it.
Yeah, to the kid. Yeah.
I'm not sure. All right. So, they do have their quarterback, Graham Mertz, coming back. He was a little inconsistent last year. He's going to have to step up. I think this is his 3rd year now being in the system. So, he's going to have to step up. I'm going to throw out one stat that I think most people would kind of be surprised to hear. Wisconsin has the most wins in the college football playoff era that has not made the college football playoff. That's a big deal. They have the most wins of any team that has not made the college football playoff since the playoff began. So, you know, Paul Christ has done a heck of a job there. They went 9-4, 6-3 last year in the Big Ten. And, you know, looking at their schedule, you know, John said 8-4, and that might be where they land. I think they do have a chance of maybe going 9-3 and getting to a big bowl. I'm probably going to stick with the 8 wins like John did, though. Just to be on, I think that's where they'll land is 8-4.
Yeah. Playing it safe, 8-4, both of y'all. Okay. But John, you know, we are
Penn State.
Hey, you're right. Tell me, buddy.
Yeah. Well, a funny stat come out to me today. From 2016 to 2019, they was 42-11. They've been 11-11 since. That's not good, especially under Franklin. You know, and quarterback play's not been real good. Line play has struggled. You know, they're kind of thin at linebacker. They lost their punter last year, Jordan Stout. But they do got some playmakers, Mitchell Tinsley, Tinsley, I'm sorry, Parker Washington. So they're gonna have some weapons on the outside and the inside at wide receiver this year. But you know, at the end of the day, they need to get back to big Penn State football. You know, line play, quarterback play, you know, when Joe Paterno was there. And, you know, if they want to be Big East contenders or Big East, I'm sorry, Big Ten contenders again. But at the end of the day, I just think Penn State, you know, I think they'll win 8 games and go to a good bowl.
8 games in a good bowl. Brad?
Yeah, I mean, James Franklin started out really hot there, you know. I mean, like John said, from 2016 to 2019, they went to a Rose Bowl, a Fiesta Bowl, a Sugar Bowl, you know, and they just really have fallen off the last 2 years. John is right. They're 11-11 in their last 22 games. They ended last year 2-6. They started 5-0 and ended 2-6. They finished the season 7-6 last year. They do have their quarterback back again. Sean Clifford is back again. Seems like he's been there, I don't know, for 12 years. I'm pretty sure by now. I think he's got that extra year going this year, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But you know, Sean Clifford is back again. He does have a good wide receiver core. He has Washington back, Lambert Smith back, and they brought in WKU's 80. He had 87 pass catches last year and 14 TDs. They brought him in as a transfer. You know, they got to have a better pass rush on defense, and I'm going to give you a little bit of stats from last year. So, in the games they won, and well, no, let me take this back. In 20-point games or less that they gave up last year, they were 7-1. The other 5 games, they were 0-5. So that tells you that they're not scoring too many points. They don't have a whole lot of offense. I mean, 20 points is not, you know, you got to have some offense to cover 20 points. They were 0-5 when they gave up 20 points or more last year defense. So, you know, they opened the season second game of the year at Auburn. That's going to be a big game.
Yes, it is.
That's going to be a huge game for them. It's a huge game for Auburn as well, and Brian Harrison. You know, that's going to be an absolute monster of a game. Now, I don't think that Franklin's on the hot seat or nothing like that. But you never know if the wheels fall off again. You know, finishing the season 2-6, Penn State's not going to put up with that for too long. No, they're not. You know, so you know they do get 5 home games in the Big Ten this year. They get Northwestern, Minnesota, Ohio State, Maryland, and Michigan State, and then they play Purdue, Michigan, Indiana, and Rutgers away. So, I'm looking at their schedule. I really don't want to pick the exact same that John picked, and I think there's a chance that maybe they do just win 7 games. I'm not real sure, but I'm going to give Franklin the benefit of a doubt and give him 8-4 on this season.
Okay, well, good for Frank. If he goes 8-4, he's going to keep his job. We are Penn State, can live with that. So
yeah, 8-4. But now, finishing the season 2-6 like he did last year, they're not going to put up with that.
not for too much longer. And they like him up there. They really do. So, okay, we'll move on. That's all right. John, tell me what's going on in East Lansing. What about those Spartans?
I tell you, I love Mel Tucker. I think he's a heck of a coach, but I still think he's a year away. He's got Peyton, but he does have some guys coming back. Peyton Thorne, Broussard, the transfer, Berger, one of the top running backs in the country. They brought back Jaden Reed. The biggest thing with Michigan State last year was they're rushing the quarterback and just inconsistencies on defense, which they was beat up a lot in the secondary, and which they'll be a little bit healthier this year. They also gave up 324 passing yards, and that's not going to cut it with Mel Tucker because Mel Tucker's a hard-nosed coach. So I believe he'll get that fixed. I believe he'll get things situated. But if I had to really pick something now, I think I'd go 8-4. But I still think Michigan State is a year away from really knocking the doors down on the whole NIL and recruiting. As you've seen with Mel Tucker, he's recruited his tail off. He's getting some 5 stars in there, 4 stars. So I believe next year will be the year that you'll see Mel Tucker and Michigan State really take off. But they got some pieces this year to contend.
Yeah.
So I think they'll go 8-4. I wouldn't even go as far as say they might go 9-4, 9-3. So I like this Michigan State team.
Yeah, well, I will tell you, they were very early to like the transfer portal and being early to that and doing good with that. So as far as that goes, they're very early to the curve of things, and so I could see them doing well with the NIL and transferring that in, being an early contender with that stuff. I could see it all working well for them. John, I think you hit it, but Brad, tell me about it.
Well, Mel Tucker put together one heck of a season last year, to be honest with you. They went 11-2, 7-2 in the Big Ten last year, and when you look at their defensive stats last year, it makes you wonder how in the world they did that, actually. They did lead the Big Ten in sacks and tackle for loss, but their secondary was miserable. Honestly, they were terrible. John said 324. I saw something today that said 325. And just to put that into perspective, that's just passing yards now. They give up 325 passing yards a game. To put that in perspective, the last time a team gave up 325 yards a game was a 2017 UConn team that I'm pretty sure went winless or one win. So for them to put together a season of 11-2 for that is amazing, to be honest with you. They beat Penn State, they beat Michigan, they beat Pittsburgh in the Peach Bowl, won a New Year's Six Bowl last year. That's a heck of a season. Mel Tucker just has put together, in 2 years, I believe, has always been there, and put together an amazing year last year. They did bring in a cornerback this year from Georgia. His last name is Speed, Amir Speed. He was highly recruited out of Georgia, or to Georgia, and they brought him in as a transfer. They're trying to shore up their secondary a little bit to go with what they have. They play at Washington, the third game of the season. They go to the Pac-12 and play the Huskies. I think that'll be a tough game away. It'll be a good atmosphere out there at the Washington for the Huskies. And they get Minnesota, Ohio State, Wisconsin, Rutgers, and Indiana at home. And then they get Maryland, Michigan, Illinois, and Penn State away. So their schedule, I can easily see them. I think this is a 9-3 team. That's what I'm going to give them.
9-3.
Yeah.
9-3 is not bad, especially.
They're going to have to shore up a little defense. I don't think they're going to have the same luck that they had last year winning games with that kind of defense.
Brad, you quoted a winless team that doesn't have football anymore, so they're going to have to play some defense in the Big Ten.
Absolutely. That was the last time that somebody give up 325 pass yards a game.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, John, let's go out to Iowa, man. What about those Hawkeyes?
Iowa returns 8 starters on defense, and they bring back Spencer Petras at quarterback. So the pieces are there, but last year Iowa O-line gave up 31 sacks, and they struggled to even score 23 points a game. So, offensive line, quarterback play is going to have to be a lot better, because you can't leave the defense in the hands of Iowa every single game. So at the end of the day, though, I got Iowa winning 7 games. I just don't think quarterback play is going to get much better. That's just me. But the defense will be there, though. The defense will keep them in the games.
Yeah. Okay. Brad, what about it?
Their coach been there for 24 years. I'll start with that. You don't see that kind of tenure much anymore at schools or even in the profession, really. So they went 10-4, 7-3 last year. They lost in the Big Ten championship game. And then they lost in the bowl game to Kentucky in Citrus Bowl. That's the first time they've lost a bowl game since 2016. So, this team, he's got them going. Defensively last year, they were, one of the top teams in the country. They led the nation in interceptions. They had 25 interceptions last year. They only gave up 19 points a game. They were 9th in total yards on defense last year. And a whole lot of their defensive power from last year are back. They got a great linebacker core coming back. They've got a ball-hawking cornerback coming back by the name of Raleigh Moss. He's back from injury from last year. Their offense is what holds them back from even doing more. I think they've been having, he's talking about Petras being back. I think they're going to have a little quarterback competition this year. They got Padilla that I believe, and a redshirt freshman, to be honest with you, that, I think, because they're going to have some more offense if Kirk wants to get this team to actually win a Big Ten championship.
Right.
So they were ranked 101st last year in rushing offensively, and they're going to have to do better than that to improve on what they did last year. They play Iowa State. That's their out-of-conference game that, is a rival game for them. They play them the second game of the year. And they only get 4 home games in the Big Ten. They get Michigan, Northwestern, Wisconsin, and Nebraska. Their away games are Rutgers, Illinois, Ohio State, Purdue, and Minnesota.
Yeah.
When you play defense, you always have a chance to win.
Right.
So, I look at them and, I really think they can go probably 9-3 again.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
No reason they can't, man. For sure. They step up and play better. There's no reason they can't do better than that. So I understand that. But John, people are calling for Frost's job in Nebraska. They are, especially on our page. Ball Down South, people are in the comments calling for his job. Tell me about what's going on in Nebraska.
I will say this, that he hasn't had a winning season in 4 seasons, a winning record in 4 seasons. So it couldn't get no worse than what's going on right now. But they ain't been to a bowl since 2016. Their offense ranked 7th in the country last year. Looking at their schedule, they start out with at Northwestern, play North Dakota, Georgia Southern, and Oklahoma. There's 3 games there where they could go 3-0.
Yes.
And they might get the fan base back a little bit. But you're going to have to win some games here at Nebraska. You can't, because this is a pride program. Tom Osborne built this thing, and it shouldn't be in the shape that it's in at this point,
Right.
because Nebraska fans love football. That's a football town.
Yeah.
That's a college town.
Yeah.
And I feel like, if Scott Frost does what he's done the last 4 years, I just don't see him sticking out. I think he'll be gone.
Yeah.
But I got them winning 6. I think they'll go to a bowl this year. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and let him say they'll go to a bowl.
Yeah.
They'll go 6-6.
6-6, get to a bowl game, squeeze in there. Yep. All right, Brad, what about it?
Well, I'm on, Scott Frost, you talking about his job. I mean, he's 15-29 at Nebraska. I mean, all my life, like, Nebraska's been one of the top teams in the country year after year after year until 8 or 10 years ago, maybe something like that. They were 3-9 last year. They were 1-8 in the Big Ten. I'll tell you what he's done. He's brought in Pitt's offensive coordinator. Mark Whipple is his name. This guy is the one that, orchestrated Kenny Pickett's season last year.
Yeah.
So, and they brought in a slew of transfers, to be honest with you. They brought in Texas quarterback Casey Thompson, wide receiver Trey Palmer from LSU, Marcus Washington from Texas. So they've brought in a bunch of people to try to overhaul this team and get it to where, they can win and basically save Scott Frost's job, because that's, it's basically all or nothing this year, I believe. They have a slew of people coming in on defense and transfers to help on defense as well. They were last in the Big Ten last year in turnovers, creating turnovers on defense. They were near the bottom in sacks on defense last year. They just, 3-9 year after year in Nebraska is not going to cut it.
No, it's not.
And they gave him a 5th year. Most of the time in these cases, a 4th year will get you. And, if he doesn't turn it around this year, I definitely think he'll be gone.
Real quick, do y'all remember how good he was at UCF? Do y'all remember how good he was?
Yeah. He had some winning records and everything. Yeah, absolutely. They were not just winning records. I mean, they were 10-1, 11-0 one time there.
Right.
He may have been under there. They were powerhouse.
Remind me, I don't remember this 100%. I'm blanking on it. Was he the coach of the team that declared themselves the national champs, even though they didn't really win the national championship that year? Was that his team?
I'm not real sure. I'd have to look that up. But now he was there either. It was probably his players,
Right.
at least.
Yeah.
At least if he wasn't the coach, it was probably a whole lot of his players.
Well, I know he was there when Bortles was there, but I didn't know if he was still there when they declared themselves the national
Well, he's
champion.
been at Nebraska. This is his 5th year, so I don't know how. I'd have to go back and look.
Yeah, right.
But when you look at their schedule, of course, their big rival game's Oklahoma. They open the season with Northwestern, a Big Ten team. Now, you wouldn't think that would be a huge game, but I think to open the season with a conference game is going to be a big deal for them. I think that's a almost must win for Scott Frost. He's brought in all these players. He's brought in the OC. And, I think they're going to have to show that they've got something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I can see this team, making a bowl game. And that's probably where I would put them, is maybe 6-6.
Yeah.
And, would that be enough to save his job in Nebraska after going 15-29 in 4 years? I mean, I'm not sure. It's maybe it might save his job and get him one more year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, they tend to keep people a little bit out there. They're not quick to fire everybody, but the fans are. They're in our chat. They're talking about it already. So they're hungry. That's for sure. John, this coach talks about rowing the boat right here. He still talks about rowing the boat all the time. Tell me about Minnesota. What's going on? They rowing the boat to a bowl game?
I think they'll be back again this year. They had 9 wins a year ago. And I read something the other day. Fleck said that he failed as a head coach last year. And I think more or less that had to do with how the offense was grounded at times. The offense was inconsistent at times. The defense was top 10 defense in scoring total yards, but they did lose 6 of the top 8 D linemen that they had. So there's going to be a lot of work in progress this year. They do bring back Tanner Morgan. Shout out to a Kentucky kid. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he played at Perry Central. But I love PJ Fleck. I think PJ Fleck is a good quarterback or good coach, and I think he'll do really good at Minnesota. He's done good at Minnesota. He was done good at Western Michigan. Everywhere he's went, he's just won, and that's what I love about this coach. And I think they're going to do it again this year. I think there's a chance for them to go 8-4. 9 wins last year was a big deal to Minnesota, but I just think losing that many guys on D and counting on a bunch of transfers that they got coming in, I just, how they mesh and whatnot, I just don't see the type of season they had a year ago.
Yeah. Brad looks like he's got something interesting to say about rowing the boat. Come on, man.
Well, I'm going to start with this with them. So a few years back in 2019, they won 11 games and threw the ball all over the field, had like 5,600 passing yards. And their offense the last couple of years has kind of fell off. So what they did is they went out and they brought their OC back from 2019. And Tanner Morgan is a 5th-year starter, and it's his old OC. So they're hoping, PJ Fleck is hoping that they can row that boat with a passing game, to be honest with you. That's what I think is what they're working on. Talking about PJ Fleck for a minute, the job he's done at Minnesota is simply amazing, to be honest with you. I mean, Minnesota, for most of college football for the last 20, 30 years, has been a nobody. I mean, honestly, most of the time, if they win 2 or 3 games a season, that's, that was where they were at for many, many years. This is his 6th year coming up. He's been there 5 years. He's 35-23 at Minnesota.
Yeah.
I mean, that says something to me. I mean, I think he's one heck of a coach.
Right.
Defensively last year is where it was at for them. They were first in the Big Ten in total defense. They were 3rd in the nation, and they only gave up this was 3rd in the nation. They gave up 279 yards a game and only 17 points.
Yeah.
I mean, that was 3rd in the nation. I mean, that's just unreal for a Minnesota team.
Mm-hmm.
And, this time they're going to have to start with the D front, the D line. That's where the defense is going to have to start. They do have some corners back from last year's team as well. I expect them to be a really great defensive team. And, they start the season out, their big game non-conference is Colorado, which I think that's at home. I think that's a winnable game, and then they play Purdue, Rutgers, Northwestern, and Iowa at home. So if you can take care of business at home, then you got Michigan State, Penn State, and Wisconsin, basically the big games away. I think this Minnesota team can make a little noise in the Big Ten this year. Now, do I think they'll make enough noise to make the championship game? Probably not. But I could easily see this team going. I want to say 9, but I'm going to say 8-4. I can see this team going 8-4.
8-4.
Yeah, and I think that Minnesota fans would be happy.
Yeah. Well,
for those listening out there, I made an incorrection. Tanner Morgan played at Hazard, not Perry County.
oh, okay.
That was a mistake on my part. That's from that same area, but I thought he went to Perry County, but it was Hazard.
Okay. That's all right. Well, can you tell me a little bit about Purdue and Jeff Braun? What's going on up there?
I love this Purdue team. They bring Aiden McConnell. He gives Purdue unbelievable chance in every single game opportunity. They brought back Milton Wright. Iowa transfer Tyrone Tracy. They got 2 stud tight ends, Garrett Miller and Payne Durham. They bring back 3 starters on the offensive line. They got a lot of depth on defense. Their defense is what's going to be their strong point. I'm just going to go flat out and say it. I'm just going to go out on a limb and just say it. This could be the year Purdue breaks up some kind of party in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
They're that talented in that town, and they start out with Penn State of all teams, and that will prove, how far they will go. And what's fun about it is they get Penn State at home.
Right.
And if they win that game, there's an opportunity for Purdue to make some noise in the Big Ten. So I got Purdue. I got them going 10-3.
Okay. 10-3.
This is going to be a fun team to watch this year.
All right. Well, we'll be watching. Brad, are you as high on Purdue as he is?
I don't. Yeah, in a way, yes. The answer to that would be yes. I like this Purdue team. Jeff Braun has done a fantastic job everywhere he's went, I believe. I mean, he was at WKU for a few years, done a great job there. I mean, he's basically 500 at Purdue in 5 years. But that says something. He went 9-4 last year, was 6-3 last year in the Big Ten. They had the 5th best passing attack in the nation last year, and they beat Tennessee. Everybody wants to talk about the great offense that Tennessee has and giving them some hype and chances this year. They beat Tennessee in the Music City Bowl last year. That says something. And I want to give a little shout out to Aiden O'Connell. He's a 6th year senior this time. And he's a former walk-on. He spent the first 2 or 3 years there as a walk-on. And, last year he passed for 3,700 yards, 28 TDs, 72% completion percentage. And, that's for a former walk-on. And to do that kind of job and win 9 games, 6 games in the Big Ten last year, and to be coming back, I'm pretty high on him. I think that's an absolute crazy job. Just wonderful to do that.
Yeah.
They have 8 starters back on defense. Now their defense was kind of mediocre last year. It wasn't terrible and it wasn't great. It was kind of in the middle. I think they were like 40 something in the nation on defense. So, their defense is kind of where they would, give up some points, but they'd have to outscore people. And that's kind of what they did. Their defensive line should be solid this year. And John's right. They start out with Penn State, first game of the season, and it's at home. That'll be a huge game for them. If they can beat Penn State, then they get 3 games, non-conference games that look winnable to me. So that'd be a great start. Be 4-0 and a great start. Already 1-0 in the Big Ten,
Yeah.
and then you got Nebraska and Iowa and Northwestern at home, and they play Minnesota, Wisconsin are the two big games away. You look at their schedule. I think 9-3 is possible.
Okay.
Excuse me. I think 9-3 is possible for this team, and that would be a big surprise for a lot of people in the Big Ten.
Yeah. 9-3 is possible. So let's keep it in the same state, but down the road a little bit. John, tell me about Indiana.
Oh, Indiana last year, it wasn't good. They was 2-10 last year. But they bring in, I apologize, Connor Bazelak from Missouri. I think he'll be a big fit for their offense. You know, you can't do no worse than 2-10 last year, especially after the year they had in 19 and 20 where they went to back-to-back bowl games. So, and they bring back 4 starters, 7 starters, I'm mistaken, on defense, 7 starters. And so they'll be better. Now, am I going out on a limb and saying Indiana's going to go out here and compete for a Big Ten championship? No, it's not what I'm saying. But I think they'll have better quarterback play. I believe their defense will be a little bit better, and I believe they'll get back to a bowl game. But it'll be a short season, 6-6. I just don't, the talent. I don't know. It's just not there. It's Indiana football is just nothing compared to what Indiana basketball is. You get my drift? It's like Kentucky basketball and Kentucky football. You get what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's 2 different sides of it,
Yeah.
But and Kentucky's a football school. I'll just say that on the air. So,
Yeah.
but anyways,
Calipari rivalry here on this.
but I think they'll have a better season this year. I just don't think it'll be what they want, but it'll be a 6-6 season, and it will be a bowl game. So they'll be back bowling. So
Okay. All right. Brad, tell me about Indiana.
Well, with Indiana, you go back to the COVID season when a lot of the bigger teams like Wisconsin and Penn State were starting off awful slow, 0-5, 2-4. Some of the starts that they had. Indiana is one of the schools that actually stepped up. I think they went like 6-1 or something in the Big Ten that year. They and then last year preseason, in a lot of polls they were ranked. They were ranked before the season last year, and then went out and had a clunker of a season, 2-10, 0-8 in the Big Ten last year.
Yeah.
Tom Allen, this is his 6th year coming up. They play at Cincinnati, the 3rd game of the season. And they also play WKU, who has had some stellar offensive output lately. That game's at home for them. I don't think either one of those games are going to be easy games for them. Even though one's at home, they certainly aren't going to have an easy game at Cincinnati.
Right.
They did bring in Connor Bazelak from Missouri, and they are basically overhauling the offense and defense with transfers. They brought in, all kinds of people on both sides of the ball to try to shore things up. They did bring back Tywan Mullen from injury from 2001. So, he's a cornerback. He's going to be one of their stars probably on defense. They get 5 games at home. They get Illinois, Michigan, Maryland, Penn State, and Purdue, Iowa, Rutgers, Ohio State, and Michigan State on the road. I just can't see where this team gets to 6 wins. I'm going to be honest with you. I think they're going to come up short. I think they will have an improvement from last year. Last year was 2-10 and 0-8. So, I can see them getting 5. I think they'll go 5-7
5-7.
and just miss out on a bowl game.
That's tough. It's tough, but somebody's got to miss, like we always say. John, tell me about Northwestern.
Well, they scored 16 points a game, last year, and they lost Cam Porter for the season last year. He'll be back. They bring back Evan Hull, really good running back. They was 3-9 last year, and the defense wasn't real good. The offense wasn't real good. But they did get some transfers out in the front 7 on defense, so they'll be a little bit better. The D though was 119th in the nation against the run, and that's not good considering what division and conference they're in, the Big Ten, because the Big Ten likes to play ground and pound.
Yeah.
So the defense is going to have to get better. The offense is going to have to get better. It couldn't be no worse than what they did last year. So I don't know. I guess I'll give them a better season than they did last year, but I just don't see them, especially with their schedule. I don't see them winning 6 games to get to a bowl. I say they'll go 5-7.
5-7. What is it? Doom and gloom in the Big Ten. Come on now. Brad, tell me something about Northwestern.
Well, so with Northwestern, they have Pat Fitzgerald. I'm going to talk about him first. I mean, this will be his 17th year. He does have a winning record. He's 109-90 at Northwestern in the Big Ten. I mean, I think that says a lot about Pat Fitzgerald as a coach. He has only had back-to-back losing seasons once in his tenure in 16 years. So, and they had a losing season last year. They were 3-9, went 1-8, missed out on several close games. They weren't very efficient on offense last year. And that's they're not going to be a team that's going to throw it all over the field and have, people with 80, 90, 100 catches and stuff like that. That's not who they are. That's not who Pat Fitzgerald is. And that's not what they're going to do. They're more of a controlled, efficient offense. And that was their problem last year, I believe, is they had trouble. They had trouble on third downs on offense.
Yeah.
They had a whole lot of turnovers on offense. And, and basically stubbed their toe all the time and had to get off the field and left it on the defense. So, they do bring 4 starters back on the offensive line, and one of those is a really good tackle that has a chance to be all Big Ten, on the tackle for a tackle in the Big Ten. So, they do start the season out with Nebraska. I will say this. So, and that game actually is not even in America. I don't know if anybody knows that, but that game is actually in Dublin, Ireland. That's where that game is played at. So, they do start out at Nebraska with Nebraska. And if they can win that game, then they got 3 games, that I think is winnable. They could be setting 4-0, which would already in September have more wins than they had last
year.
Yeah. So, if they can do that, I think there's a chance they could go bowling. But I believe that Nebraska game is an absolute must at the beginning of the season.
Right.
Because they play Wisconsin, Ohio State, and Illinois at home the rest of the year. They get Penn State, Iowa, Minnesota, and Purdue away. I just don't – if they can't win the Nebraska game to begin the season, I don't see where they can get 6 wins. I'm going to give them a chance to get that, but I'm going to stick with 5. I think they don't get it and they get 5. But if they win the Nebraska game, I think they can get 6 wins.
Yeah, I understand that. I do. I totally understand that. John, tell me about Illinois.
You know, this is a very interesting team because I'm going to throw out a stat for you. Last year, they outscored their opponents 174 to 170. But the biggest thing was their consistency on offense. And in those games that they outscored opponents, they lost very close games. Maryland, Purdue, and Rutgers. And I feel like that this team will go better than they did last year at 5-7. They bring back Chase Brown, Josh McCray. The biggest problem with Illinois has been the last couple of years has been in the trenches and the line play. They're going to have to get better on both sides of the ball. And I believe Brett Bielema will do that. You know, he did that at Wisconsin, did it at Arkansas. And it's a Big Ten school. So, at the end of the day, they ground and pound, and you got to have lines to move people back, move them around. So, but I'm going to go as far as say that Illinois, they'll do better on their records from a year ago. So I think they'll go 7-5. I think this is I wouldn't say it's a great team, but it's a team that should have won at least 3 more games than they did last year. They're a lot better than what they showed because they did beat Penn State in Happy Valley last year. They got some talent on that squad.
Are they popping champagne and champagne?
I think they'll pop 7 wins this year. I mean, that's better than they did a year ago. So
I don't know about no champagne now. Right. Tell me something about it.
Yeah, so I'm going to give you a stat from them from last year. So in 7 of the last 10 games, Illinois failed to score 20 points on offense. You're not going to beat too many teams. I said this about another team, a few minutes ago. You're not going to beat too many teams if you can't score 20 points a game.
Right.
And I think that's, they were inconsistent on offense and couldn't score a whole lot. And that's what John was talking about. They lost a few close games. That's the reason why they lost close games is they just couldn't score as much as they need to. 20 points a game is really on the low end. You really need to be over 25 or 27, to be a great offense, to be a good team. So 20 points a game is really on the low end. They do have two sneaky good running backs, Brown and McCray, and they're both back. And they brought in a transfer quarterback from Syracuse.
Yeah.
Tommy DeVito. They brought him in on offense. So they are trying to shore up a few things on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
They do have some star power in the back half of the defense. Sidney Brown was an all Big Ten safety last year. He's back. And Witherspoon is a cornerback that's going to be back, that is going to be high powered for them. So they do have some stuff on both sides of the ball. They play Virginia the second game of the season. It's at Illinois. ACC school comes to town. That's going to be their big game out of conference. And then they get 4 at home: Iowa, Minnesota, Michigan State, and Purdue. And they play Indiana, Wisconsin, Nebraska, Michigan, and Northwestern away. So, looking at their schedule, I think this is a team that can get to a bowl. I'm going to say 6-6 is what I'm going to say for this Illinois team.
All right. Well, this next team, I know their receiver coach pretty well because he was at Louisville when I was there. He's a real good guy, so don't be too mean to him. John, tell me about Maryland.
I like this Maryland team. They got Tui Tagovailoa's brother. He's playing for them at quarterback. They brought in Jacob Copeland from Florida, Rakeem Jarrett, Dante Demas. They're going to be loaded at the wide receiver position, skill positions. The biggest issue with Maryland is their defense. they can't put them in bad spots like they did last year. And the health of Tagovailoa is key to this season, in my opinion, because if he goes down, I just don't see this Maryland team doing anything. Quarterback play is big in college football, and I feel like he's a really good quarterback. And when he goes down, I just don't see the D keeping up to make where the offense has to catch up. So, but with the talent that they do got on the offensive side of the ball, I could see Maryland winning 6 games and going to a bowl because Loxley is a really good head coach.
Yeah.
He's a disciple of Nick Saban, so you know you know how the disciples of Nick Saban can be. They win wherever they go. So,
Right.
but I just feel like it's the health of this offense. The defense just can't get them in bad spots. But I got them going 6-6. I just,
Yeah. 6-6. All right. Brad, you got news for him?
Well, so, this is Loxley's coming up 4th year. He's been there 3 years. Before last year, they had 6 straight losing seasons. So, last year he did get them to a bowl. They won a bowl for the first time since 2010. They went 7-6. And here's what I'm going to say about Maryland and something that they're going to have to improve on if they want to match or get better for that record for this year. So they do have Tua's a younger brother, and they did get Jacob Copeland from Florida as wide receiver. They do have a lot of talent on the offensive side of the ball. And against the teams that were not so good that they played last year, they racked up 460 yards of offense in the 7 wins. All right.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't do so well in their losses. They had 6 losses. And the same thing on their defense. On the games that they won, their defense against the lower competition teams, the defense looked pretty good.
Right.
And then the 6 losses against the better competition, they didn't look so well. So, he's brought in some transfers and a few things to try to shore that up. He's got a good hitting linebacker. So they play at Charlotte the second game of the season. I think it's kind of weird that a Maryland would go and play at Charlotte. But they do. That's their second game. And then they get SMU at home, their third game, which SMU is supposed to have a decent team, down there in Texas. So, that's 2 out of conference games. I think they can win, but, it's a couple of that they need to keep their eye out on.
Right.
They get Michigan State, Purdue, Northwestern, Ohio State, Rutgers at home. And then they play Michigan, Indiana, Wisconsin, and Penn State away.
Yeah.
So, I could easily see this team. I think they have the talent to get to a bowl game. I'm actually going to pick this team to go 7-5.
Really?
Yeah, I think this team can go 7-5. I think they have the pieces to do that on the offense.
Okay. So one more better than John. All right. Take me up to New Jersey's finest. What's Rutgers going to do? John?
Rutgers, I still feel like Greg Schiano is a year away from really doing something. He's got an inexperienced at quarterback this year, Gavin Wimsatt. He's a Kentucky kid, and he'll be thrown into the fire a little bit. They're inexperienced at linebacker some. Their defense was inconsistent last year. They lost their top 2 tacklers from last year. Their offensive line has 4 transfers on it. So I'll just be honest. This is a work in progress with Greg Schiano. There's not a lot to say about Rutgers, but at one point, Rutgers went to a big bowl back in what Greg Schiano's first time around with Rutgers. They went to a big bowl, and they can win there. It's just giving the guy time to blend his talent in there together. And I feel like last year they competed at times. They just never was. They was inconsistent.
Right.
But with the whole transfers deal and the quarterback play and experience, I just don't see them. I just don't see them going bowling. I feel like they'll be better, but they'll win 4 or 5 games.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go 4 or 5 games. I mean, you throw a kid in there with inexperience at the college level, it can get to you a little bit.
Brad, you got something sneaky. What's going on?
Well, I'm going to say this. I mean, I read this too today when I was doing a little research on them. So I read that, and John just said it as well, that you need to give him time. He's been there 21 years. I mean, how much time does a guy need? I don't really get that statement. All right. So anyways, I just thought I'd throw that out there. I read that as well today. So, 21 years is kind of a long time. I'm not real sure on that. So,
That's not right.
So anyway, on their defense this year, they did lose some linebackers and stuff. This year on their defense, they do have some experience coming back in their secondary. They have 5 returning players that played a lot last year in their secondary. And that's going to have to be one of their strong suits if they're going to improve, because that's going to be, that's where they have experience coming back in. Their quarterback, Noah Vedral, I think is how you say his name. He can also run. He was their second leading rusher last year on their team. And interestingly, they brought in Taj Harris from Syracuse, a transfer from Syracuse. He's the guy that signed with UK, and then mysteriously, I'm not sure what happened, but after signing day, a couple of months or whatever, they just reported that he wasn't going to be there. I don't know exactly what happened, but he is with Rutgers this year. So they have a wide receiver from Syracuse that done a whole lot in the ACC last year.
Mm-hmm.
He's a good wide receiver for them. So, they went, John said maybe it would be an improvement. They did go to a bowl game last year, interestingly. They were one of the best APR last year, and they went 5-7, and they actually got to go to a bowl game. Now, they lost the bowl game to Wake Forest. They played in the Gator Bowl, which is not a small bowl by any means. They played Wake Forest in the Gator Bowl and they lost. They wound up going 5-8 last year. They played 2 of their 3 out-of-conference games are away. They play at Boston College and at Temple. That's kind of interesting, I think, when you look at their schedule. They play Iowa, Nebraska, Indiana, Michigan, and Penn State at home. And they get Ohio State, Minnesota, Michigan State, and Maryland away. I think for Rutgers, going to a bowl game in the Big Ten is a win. If they can get there, that's a win every year. I'm just looking at their schedule, I don't know. I don't know if I can find 6 wins on their schedule. I think Minnesota's going to be good. I'm going to give them 5. I think they're going to go 5-7 again. That's what I think.
Okay.
A little tidbit about that Rutgers game. Like, was it last year, the bowl game? There was a lot of controversy around that Gator Bowl about who should play and who shouldn't.
No, we got to get something right here. Greg Schiano ain't been there 20 years. He had 2 stints at Rutgers. He went to Ohio.
So did he leave for a while?
Yeah. He was there from 2001 to 2011.
He had 2 stints.
Okay. All right, my bad.
But overall, I think he's been there quite a while, though.
He has been there quite a while, but he was on the first college football playoff national championship team at Ohio State. But he wasn't the head coach, or Meyer was, but he was on that staff. He figured out how to stop the spread no huddle and did that. He was on defense side of the ball. So, all right, bonus round here. Let's go to Notre Dame.
Notre Dame. Well, they lost Brian Kelly. In walks Marcus Freeman. I think he's going to do a wonderful job there. You know, they bring back a lot of veterans on this roster. You know, both of their lines are going to be the strength of their team. The biggest question is going to be the skill positions. Who's going to step up? You know, they did bring back tight end Michael Mayer, one of the best tight ends in the country. And, you know, they brought back Isaiah Foskey and Cam Hart. So there's some talent on this team. But that's going to be shown right off the bat. They're going to be playing right at Ohio State to start the season.
Yeah, for sure.
And I feel like, you know, if they lose that game, there goes playoff talk.
Yeah.
Right off the bat.
Yep.
And, you know, it still could be a good season, but you lose to Ohio State, either way, either or, both one of them lose. That right there is probably one of the biggest games of the year.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm going to say it. I feel like this Notre Dame team is going to be really good with Coach Freeman. I think he's going to do a wonderful job there, and he's already recruiting well. So I'm going to go 9 wins this year. I don't think they'll be in the playoff hunt. I think they'll be one of the top teams, top 15, but I just don't see them in his first year making a run like they did a couple of years back.
Okay.
And especially last year.
All right. Let's see if Brad can rebound from that mishap a second ago. Tell me something about Notre Dame. That's true.
So with Marcus Freeman, I mean, you know, he was Notre Dame's guy. He was the players, you know, the players pushed for him, and he was Notre Dame's guy. The boosters pushed for him, and, you know, so he's done a heck of a job as far as rallying everybody together to start with, and on the recruiting trail so far. He did coach one game last year. He coached the Fiesta Bowl last year against Oklahoma State. Had a big lead in the game. I believe it was a 21-point lead, and lost. So, you know, I will say that he did bring in Al Golden for his defensive coordinator after Brian Kelly left and he was hired. And they have a loaded defense. Their defense is got future NFL draft all over it. There's probably 3, 4, 5 guys on their defense that it might get drafted next year or the year after. You know, so, you know, their defense is loaded. Now, I'm going to say something funny here. Tommy Reese is back as the offensive coordinator. I believe he must be like the Notre Dame family chancellor's OC, favorite OC or something. He's been there for years. Kelly left. I mean, you know, and he's still there. I'm not really sure how that worked out, but I think he must be their family OC or something.
Right.
They have Tyler Buckner as their quarterback. This year, they do have a different quarterback. They lost their quarterback from last year, so that's going to be, you know, a work in process. I think a work in progress for them. So, you know, their schedule, they play Ohio State at the very beginning, the first game of the year at Ohio State. But when you go on and you look at their schedule this year, they kind of have a rough schedule. And I normally don't say that about Notre Dame, but they play at UNC, at North Carolina. They play at BYU, which BYU is ranked in the top 25 preseason, went 10-3 last year and knocked off a whole bunch of Pac-10 teams and has their quarterback back. And I believe and play a few more Pac-10 teams this year. And I believe that, you know, they could be a sleeper as well as far as knocking some teams out. And Notre Dame might be one of them. They also play Clemson at home this year, and they finish at USC. So, John said if they lose the Ohio State game, they would get knocked out or knocked out of the talk for, the college football playoffs. If you look at their schedule, even if they lose the Ohio State game, if they could put it together and run through that schedule and beat North Carolina away and BYU away and Clemson at home and Southern California away, they could still make the college football playoffs, even if they lose to Ohio State.
Yeah.
I think they can. Now, first-year coach trying to put everything together. I think they have a few question marks on the offensive side of the ball. And looking at their schedule, I think John's got it about right. I think they go 9-3 his first year.
Yeah.
And then he's on track recruiting to do a lot better than that in the next few years.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we know how the country falls in love with them early in the season. If they win 2 or 3 in a row, all of a sudden, they're going to win it all every single year. So it's going to be weird to see how it is if they drop that first one out of the gate,
Right. I don't think Notre Dame usually plays that tough of a schedule. But when I looked at their schedule this year, I was like, wow, they actually have 4 or 5 games here that, have some meaning to them.
There's a coach out there at Southern California too now. That's not a gap.
Oh yeah. That's what I'm saying. You look at their USC is going to be a tough game at USC. So you look at their schedule and it's a whole lot tougher than what you think it would be most of the time.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's going to do it for us here at Ball Down South. Like, comment, share, all that other stuff. We'll see you soon. Take care.